Hello. There is very little of value on the slide deck behind me. So if it's blinking, if you have, however, photosensitivities, I advise that you take precautions. I may use language that is inappropriate for some audiences. So if that is the case and you feel like you need a safe space, you can get the hell out, I guess. And so, I just want to just kind of mention that up front because it turns out I've been involved in a quest for quality since I was about 14 years old. Oh, the other thing, before we talk about quality, it's probably my fault, but I'm not a professional speaker. I do speak a lot, but I don't do this on a circuit or anything. So I don't carry my own kind of clicker around with me, and apparently since I don't have my own, I have to walk back over to this guy and do a little click action to get things moving. So if I have to lose eye contact with you for a moment, that's what's happening. So I've been involved with this quest for quality for a long time, probably since I was about 14 years old. I didn't realize it at the time. It turns out there's another way to look at quality that my freshman year Latin teacher explained to me. There was an interesting conversation going on, and I was just amazed by my Latin teacher. I never saw somebody so smart and brilliant in my young age at 14, and I wanted to impress this person more than anything. And so one day in Latin class, my teacher posed a non-Latin question to the class, and I thought, here's my moment to shine. He looked at the class and he said something about architecture in Rome, and he was trying to say, you know, it's unlike the Eiffel Tower, which is a kind of building structure that is hard to describe. What would you call the mechanical architecture of the Eiffel Tower? And in my brain, I had a vision. And the vision thought, I have an answer. I know what the Eiffel Tower is. So I raised my hand, and teacher calls on me, and I proudly announce, it's an erection. I wasn't wrong if we're thinking of terms of an erector set, right? That's what I had in mind. But as the words left my mouth, I noticed that the people around me were laughing, and something didn't feel quite right. And so the teacher called me aside after class, and he said, Mr. D'Andrea, why are you such an asshole? And I thought to myself at that moment that my quest in life would not be complete until I fully realized becoming an asshole in my professional career. And then I met QA engineering. And you people have fulfilled me. You are my goal in life, is to become a QA engineer, a professional asshole, if you will. And don't get me wrong, I love QA function, and I endearingly use the asshole moniker for QAs. And just out of curiosity, QA folks, I want to ask you, and I imagine you're all QA folks, but I'm going to ask anyway. So are there any product managers in the room? One, two, two-ish? Any software engineers that are not in test? So like 3 or 4? Excellent. Everybody else QA? Mostly? Yeah, QA in the house. Excellent. Lots of asshole camaraderie going on. I totally dig it. Okay, and the reason I asked that question is because many times throughout this presentation, you'll hear me talk about the wisdom of the age, which is given to us by large corporations that think they know how the world works. And one of the maxims that they walk around saying is that quality is everybody's job. And you know what? I can feel the asshole eye rolls. It's fantastic, right? Because that's right. That's a bunch of bullshit, right? We know that when the S hits the F, it's the QA team that's going to bear the burden of whatever misguided, underdeveloped, unsubstantiated, badly designed or spec'd out piece of work. The QA team will take the brunt of that. I started this quest for some more realism in our professional world. I worked in software since actually started in this building in 2004-ish. And that's kind of interesting as well that I come back around at this point. But I started this process by a simple maxim. Scrum is dumb. And some of you that might be kind of I don't know, heresy for some of you. But I assure you that if you are participating in Scrum, it has been modified away from its intention to a degree that is no longer recognizable by the people who originally decided that was a thing. And therefore, it leads to frustration and all sorts of internal jockeying for dominance around the perfect burn down charts and the right use of user stories and points and t-shirt sizing and Fibonacci sequences and all that crap. It's all dumb. It's dumb because it takes the creative genius of assholes and developers and distills it into this mechanized sort of conveyor belt commoditization of skill set. And so I figured out right away that Scrum was dumb, and I didn't really have the words for it at the time. And so I started thinking about this about 13 years ago, I guess, around somewhere around in that ballpark. And so as of late, I've been asking myself the question as my career's changed, and I've sort of gotten more into product development and more into Internet of Things type activities. And it turns out that enterprises are still buying the malarkey around Scrum, only now they call it something else. And I want to just say that SAFe is dumber. And we can talk about that a little bit later, but SAFe is a regression of logic. It takes something called Agile, and it makes it as little as anything could be Agile as possible. It extends an enormous amount of energy to put infrastructure into place to stymie any iota of creativity that could take place. It just kills it. And so if Agile was meant to be nimble, was meant to be responsive to the needs of customers and people, and SAFe just strangles the life out of whatever kind of blinking, kind of atrophied corpse that was there in the first place. So SAFe is dumber, and you can challenge me later during the Q&A section. I'll be gone for the Q&A section, but you can challenge me if you'd like during that time. And then lastly, I pulled this from the headlines the other day, and I thought it was really apropos about SAFe and Agile and Scrum, that it's only as good as your management team was willing to pay the consultants that let Agile into the building in the first place. And if you were dumb enough to trust it in the first place, then fuck you. Really. You got what you paid for. And that's what it really boils down to. If you're doing any of these things that somebody trained you to do in a way that dehumanizes you, that sucks the creativity out of you and puts you in an assembly line, fuck you. You did it to yourselves, right? That's really what we boil down to. So bear in mind that this kind of thinking, that you're trying to take advantage of anyone foolish enough to trust you, comes from consultants. That comes from the Agile machine. And we're not really going to talk much more about that today, except to say it's at the heart, though, that mentality of the product manager somehow has quality under wraps and everybody else is going to implement some vision of goodness is also a load of horseshit. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, how to dig out from this terrible place. So today we're going to talk about three major ideas, right? How do we talk about quality in a way that's integrative? How do we bring all of the disciplines together, knowing that we have all these obstacles around quality in the first place? How do we produce products that are going to be perceived by our audiences as quality in the first place? And then how do we upend this weird power structure that's in place to really get value into what we mean by quality? And then lastly, what's the entry point for quality in a software organization, in a hardware organization, in any process that we want to participate in? What's the right entry point? And so this is what our talk will be about today primarily, and we'll touch on Agile as we're going through. And there's going to be some points where I ask you to think about some questions, and I'll ask the audience to sort of think about the question I'm about to pose, about how we could have done something around a scenario a little bit better. But first, my favorite question is, who owns the product in your company? And a lot of people will hold up their hands depending on the life cycle of the company. It could be the CEO, it could be a product director, it could be a product manager, it could be a product owner. Who owns the product in your company? What? We do? Who we? The company owns the product, right? No one of these individuals owns the product. There are some folks that think they own the product, and they are completely wrong. The most wrong person is the semantically most ironic person on this list, right? The least ownership goes to the product owner. That's odd, right? The product owner, it says in the name, you'd figure the product was owned by the product owner. But that could not be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, the product owner is a proxy for the administration of the project that's at hand. There is little to no power in the product owner's hands. You know this already as QA assholes because you look at the product owner and snicker behind their back, right? They are the least powerful person in the room. So that's very cool. We figured that out. However, there's this other person, the product manager. They have the blessing of years of waterfall and other types of development processes that say, I am a professional, I make way more than the product owner, and I am part of the executive earshot. When my ideas come out, they smell like roses, right? That they are responsible for the big ideation and formulation of strategy and roadmaps and all of the things that make the business wheels turn. Now, in your sprint and backlog grooming sessions, if you're so lucky as a QA person to get invited to those rare occasions, who's in the room typically? The product manager or the product, oh, what? I almost heard your neck snap, sir. Don't shake so rigorously. Who's in the room? The developers in QA, right? The product manager is nowhere to be seen. They are off traveling to exotic client locations, sipping cocktails, playing golf, and could really care less about being in the day-to-day grind. So this joker, is anybody here a product owner? I don't mean to totally step on your neck while you're in the room. No, she's in the room. She hates the product owner. So the idea here is the product owner, however, the least powerful person in the room, is probably the most frequently ascribed to responsibilities of the product once it's being built. The backlog depends on the product owner. The day-to-day operations of the Scrum, the activities around the product itself, all go around this person with the least amount of power. And it's actually looked down upon in many cases by the product manager. So how do we fix this? How do we get quality built into this when either one of them seem to have any aspect to do with quality, right? They have responsibilities to produce value. They have timelines and burn down charts and schedules to meet. But one responsibility that doesn't come up to their pay grade is being responsible for quality. Quality is sort of this amorphous entity that tags along. Hey guys, look at me, when Agile is underway. But there's really no meat there when it comes to QA in their world. So how do we get quality up in front? Well, I want to ask you a question. To create an integrative approach to quality, I want to talk about two teams, Team A and Team B. Team A creates a product and knocks it out of the park. And this is an actual example, but the names and products have been changed for my non-disclosure needs, and I don't have any money for lawyers. So we're going to talk about a different set of products and qualities of those products. So to keep, let's just say that Team A created this product. And this product has a set of features and has a name and a brand, and it's a really great product. OxyClean, we've all heard of it. It's not actually OxyClean. OxyClean is a stand-in. I don't mean to actually disparage the people at OxyClean or their corporate overlords or their attorneys. I'm just using them as a fake example of a kind of product that could be developed. So OxyClean, it has features, it promises to deliver value, and hey, people like it. People don't complain about OxyClean all that much. It does its deal. But it's so successful that the old standbys of the world think to themselves, boy, I got to get me some of that OxyClean. So my company hires Team B to pep up our existing product with that fancy new thing called OxyClean. I mean, we have a perfectly good baking soda-based arm and hand type delivery. It makes stuff clean, reduces odors. But the kids seem to like the Oxy business, so how do we fix this? Let's combine the two things, and we'll get some sort of monstrosity like this. They take a beautiful, solid piece of work, they rebrand it and say, the product manager walks into the room and says, I got it. Introducing Arm & Hammer with OxyClean. Product manager's a genius, corporate executives can't contain themselves. They go and have another drink. They're all very excited. Hit the links. It's 2 p.m. However, there's some conditions. And the conditions are what come out when the QA gets brought into the room. QA and team, we want to let you know that we want Oxy to be part of our product. However, there are some conditions. The first one is you can't use the formula for OxyClean. You can't have any access to the materials, the team, anything that made OxyClean successful. You can't combine it and have a good enough product as someone who is a regular OxyClean customer. You will not have the same experience from Arm & Hammer with OxyClean as someone with OxyClean. We're shipping it, so start testing it. Okay, QA people, what's the problem? What's the problem? How can we improve the quality of a product that we've been told must contain Oxy? It cannot be used with the same team members, the knowledge of that team, the ingredients are not going to be the same, yet you're expected to have the same results. What can you do to solve this problem of quality? What should Team A do in this case? Can Team A do anything to improve the quality of the combined product? No, they're gone. They're successful. They're not going to help you. What will Team B do, however? What can Team B do to improve the quality of the combined Oxy Arm & Hammer product? This is where you can give me ideas. What can they do? What can they do to improve the quality given the constraints that I put on that project? Yes? Steal a manual. You mean like find the ingredients list and try to replicate the magic?
Not replicate the magic, but we have to figure out what's behind Oxy. How can we test it if we don't know what's in it?
Right, what's in it? You need to decompose it, you need to figure out and try to re-engineer it in a way that will get you the same results. That's one thing you can do. What's another thing you could do to try to meet this challenge?
You can figure out what people like about Oxy and simulate the results.
So objects in the mirror are not the same as they appear at home. The idea here is that we're just going to make it close enough to OxyClean so that we have the branding, but it might not be Oxy in the actual product itself. That's a very interesting approach. What else can we do to improve the quality of Arm & Hammer with Oxy? Oh, there's a cube. This guy's going to throw this box at you. There's a microphone in it, they tell me. What else can we do to improve the quality? Nothing? Yeah, this is an impossible challenge. It's unlikely that when it hits the marketplace, people are going to be happy. It doesn't have Oxy in it, perhaps. It doesn't perform the same way that OxyClean does, and yet it's being marketed and branded as an OxyClean product. Has quality been delivered then? Has quality been delivered? Yes? Did we sell it or no? No quality. No? Yeah, it's not quality, right? Somehow we have managed to ship a product that does not have the same quality as the original. And of course, if you're on this team, you're going to have a lot of frustration. You're going to have this overwhelming sense that you've been forced to ship a product that's not going to be good, that you've been asked to squeeze or shoehorn in features that were not appropriate. You're going to be uncertain about success. You're going to be cynical at work, and essentially, they'll have a lot of trepidation. Essentially, you'll be fucked. Essentially, you'll be fucked. And my job is to help us today figure out how to get unfucked, because people are asked to do these things daily. They're asked to create products and features that are not good, that do not bring value, that are simply the mind children of executives who want to take today's shiny object and cram it into whatever project they're working on in the effort, in the belief, the false belief that value is going to be brought about. So, how do we begin? We take a look at a couple of factors that can help us as QA interested people, as product owners, as product managers. We want to look and see where can we inject quality where we're not expected to deliver quality in an effort to create a culture of quality. And that's a big lot of words that it says you have to step out of your zone. In order to create a culture of quality, the first thing you have to do is take a look at your own role and how it interacts with that culture. And sometimes you have to say, my job is only the things that I do, the culture is everything else around me. And in order to improve that situation, you have to step out of your comfort zone and begin a process of socialization and creating relationships outside of the org chart that you are particularly a part of. Additionally, you have to look at the process and tools that you've inherited or created for yourself and see if they're appropriate for the task of creating value. If they don't, you need to figure out ways to circumvent your own processes and get back to some of the original ideals that came out in the Agile Manifesto in the first place, looking at the people around you and saying, is there a way for us to carve out proactive quality in our work? The second thing I'd like to talk about today is upending our idea of what quality is in the first place. I'm going to stand by the podium for these because these quotes are going to kind of flash by. But back in the 60s, this quote was a big motivator to QA teams, that quality is of value to some person who matters. And that some person is loosely defined, and certainly we have a different definition of what that person looks like today. But I'll tell you, it is probably still the same person, and that's the person paying the bills, right? The customer, and then your boss. Next, by integrating QA more deeply into the product design process earlier in the life cycle, risk can be considerably decreased, and small issues can be resolved early when the cost to resolve is still negligible. What process has this person been drinking the Kool-Aid of, right? That somehow Agile is going to create a better entry point for quality than has been previously been able to be attained. Unfortunately, though, we know that QA in Agile typically does not get a seat at the table early enough to have their voice or their inputs if they get invited to the table at all. And then lastly, back to this idea that the team owns quality. The idea that QA might not even be a necessary function for successful product delivery in the first place. And so these three evolving thoughts around QA have a detrimental effect on our collective understanding of how QA teams can deliver value. And the reason I mention that is because we don't see QA at the table at the very beginning of an enterprise, at the very beginning of a client engagement, at the very beginning of an ideation session. QA is usually a reactive contributor rather than a proactive contributor. An example of this, you might be familiar with this one. So somebody thought that this is Clippy. Some of you might not know Clippy. Some of you might not have been born when Clippy was introduced. Clippy was a menu-driven assistant, called the Office Assistant technically, but Clippy was one of the personas of the Office Assistant. So somebody thought at Microsoft, a good product feature would be to have this animated little paper clip pop up and help us walk through familiar tasks in case we forgot how to do them in the sleep, or we got hit on the head, or we forgot where the start button was. So Clippy would pop up at any kind of moment, unless you disabled it after a lot of work on trying to figure out how to do that. And Clippy would pop up. Now, Clippy got a lot of backlash after it rolled out in 1995, again in 98, and then a 3D version in 2000. Clippy was an idea that would not die. And Clippy needed to die. Now, you'd figure 20 years would go by and Clippy we figured nobody liked Clippy. There's memes about Clippy. Clippy is, buried in the annals of history. And so when we got to this new kind of 21st century Microsoft experience, and everything's Office 365 and everything's, trying to be more accessible online, that Clippy would be gone. But Clippy is not gone. Clippy is still there. Where is Clippy in this case? Can you find Clippy? What? Need help? Yeah, there's Clippy. Clippy lives here now. Only when you click need help, there is no animated wizard-like animation of a paperclip. There is a wizard-like animated script of pseudo AI that pops up. that essentially walks through almost identically the scripts of Clippy without the Clippy icon. There is a movement afoot at Microsoft right now to change the icon of the AI assistant to Clippy. And I just want to let you know that this thing is happening because even after all of our best efforts to, as consumers, tell product people that Clippy is persona non grata, or clip non grata, we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to say, okay, if I am going to have a say in how products are created, if I have this sense of having a, what is going on here? I apologize. There's Clippy. There we are. We go back to this idea of culture and org chart and saying, if QA was brought to the table, QA would have heard or brought to the attention of somebody that the Clippy process, even though the animated clip was really the problem, users don't need the kind of hand-holding that the Office Assistant was providing. That we have to look out and say, can we get back to the basics of what it means to have quality in the first place? But unfortunately, quality is a moving target. It's a moving, bouncing 3D target that annoys the hell out of people. That every new phase of software development, of quality processes comes into vogue, and we forget about what's important. The quality point changes as processes change. We talked a little bit earlier about the waterfall to agile transition, to the safe transition, but there are points through which QA can move itself up into the hierarchy of quality discussions with product at the heart of this, right? So where does that happen? In Agile and Scrum, some of the suggestions earlier were, hey, if we just get product to listen to QA earlier in the Agile or Scrum model, we'll be able to incorporate better, say, I don't know, acceptance criteria and test cases so that our user stories are easily defined early on in the process. Well, that will only get us so far. Because remember, the product manager is typically not going to be in the room. And to create a community or a culture of quality, QA has to have access to the holders of the true corporate culture. And that's not, unfortunately, at the seat of the product manager. It's really at the C-level. In SAFE, those problems only get exacerbated. In SAFE, the idea that anybody can have an impact on quality is almost impossible to achieve, because by the time a team gets the release train, marching orders, that whatever is going to be in a particular release, those discussions have happened and are passed down as if they were scripture from a PMO. And so the opportunity to bring quality into the conversation is even further strangulated. There is an opportunity, however, to kind of flip this around. That the quality opportunities that we have for software development are not all lost because of Agile. There's this newfangled thing that people keep bastardizing called Lean. And Lean, the Lean startup model has this thing called the MVP. And let me just say about the MVP for just a moment. The MVP is probably the most maligned acronym that I think I've heard of in my professional career. The minimum viable product, the words minimum and viable allow people to use English in twisted ways. That when we say minimum viable, we think about normal English usage and think it's anything that can limp out the door is a minimum viable expression of a product. In fact, what was intended by the minimum viable product was an entity, a product, a software solution that was able to be evaluated out in the world so that you could learn from it without having invested a lot of energy, time, or dollars into getting it underway. So it's a complex thought that you're not actually selling it, yet you need to make it in order to validate your business idea. This is anathema to how businesses work. If they build it, they want to make money on it right away. There is no time for learning. There is no time for measurement. So startups really have an advantage when it comes to creating MVPs, but you are all probably part of an MVP team as we speak. If you're on an Agile team, you are probably creating an MVP of some kind. And I assure you, that MVP was not what is intended. That MVP that you're working on is that best thing, the best case example that can limp out the door. That's not what the MVP is. The MVP is an opportunity for QA and for testers in another way. And that interesting way that MVPs can save the product management team and the create a culture of quality is because, as I mentioned earlier, and will continue to say, QA administrators, QA assurance professionals are assholes, but they're good assholes. They can drive deep questions and critical thinking into hard problems that need to be solved at the MVP stage. To insert a QA person into the MVP process is really the way that QA is going to forge forward as we talk about the next phase of bringing quality to the table. By taking over the MVP process, QA can reinvent itself. By bringing QA to the front of the MVP equation, you're not only challenging who owns the product, but why you're creating new products in the first place. Why are you putting Oxy in the middle of Arm & Hammer? Why are you putting Clippy under the covers of an AI pseudo Clippy system? Why are you doing these things in the first place? Those questions are right now not being asked before they hit the markets, before time and money are being spent. By inserting QA and critical thinking at the beginning of the MVP process, you might begin to start realizing the benefits of testing these types of theories and experiments that MVPs have in mind. So keep that in mind as you are listening to the jargon of the day regarding MVPs, that QA needs to be at the table every time an MVP is mentioned or brought to the table. The other piece of this is kind of interesting as well, that if you want to have quality, a culture of quality, you need to socialize the message. You can't just be an isolated asshole. You can't just be a grumbly, bitter, and hypercritical of your teammate kind of person if you want to be successful in QA. There has to be a way for you to reach out, socialize with teams in a proactive way outside of your workload. And this is a challenge, right? Because even though we all claim to have flat organizations, that there are no bosses, we're all on teams, that's a bunch of bullshit. You know who your bosses are. You know who is going to give you your 90-day review or your quarterly review or your annual review. And so you are marching in line to make sure not to disrupt that boat. I assure you, though, quality cannot become part of your vernacular if you are afraid all of the time. Additionally, being a part of an advocacy group for a learning culture and participating in the creation of MVPs is essential for a quality environment to prosper. You need to figure out ways to not only say no, but explain that that no is wrapped in a desire for everyone to come along for a learning ride. That somehow you are going to foster a moment of learning for the organization rather than a critique. Also, assholes, please become better listeners. I have to do that myself. I am not a good listener in general. I think I know what I'm talking about when I say it. Chances are I'm generalizing and don't know what I'm talking about. But I'm working on it. And as part of the thing that makes us interested in quality and the thing that repels people who want to have a conversation is because of that person in the middle there, right? The idea that you're a perfectionist, that you want to have the answers, that you want to do the right thing, gets in the way of being a good listener. And it turns out that allowing other people to talk is the best way to get them to like you. So if no one ever told you that before, start doing that. But you're probably onto that already. If you're not, please start. Create alliances and proactively go after experiments and measure those results. You have to be the guinea pig of the MVP. So you can't just say you want it. You actually have to, in addition to your testing work, in addition to running your automated test scripts, in addition to the work that you have to do to ship what you're about to ship, if you want things to improve, you have to go over and above your call. You have to do more than what's on your plate. And by doing that, you will demonstrate goodwill. You'll be able to go to that manager who says, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions, and be able to hand them a set of data that says, hey, in order for us to be successful here, we should ask this question before we invest money, and then demonstrate why the experiment will save money. It's not enough just to say we shouldn't do something that looks dangerous. By requiring that kind of rigor before work begins, you are demonstrating a principle of business strategy that is valuable to your stakeholders. That when you begin to take, instead of being a draw on the budget by being an extra body doing QA in a world that doesn't value QA being in the room, you begin to demonstrate how you add dollars by not wasting them. And that change of mindset only comes when QA feels empowered to participate in business that way. That's it. Thank you. Questions, comments, criticisms?
The thing that came to my head as we're going over these conversations, and I'm curious, it's a question thrown out there to the general mass of anybody, is the idea of a bad idea that's getting pushed down and won't die. I mean, I'm sure that we've all seen that in our own situation somewhere, somehow, for some reason. And because of that, I've gotten to a point where I hate MBAs. They drive me bonkers because...
MBA product manager.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
You got an MBA, you're up the chain a little bit,
Yeah,
you think
yeah.
you've got the answer, you've got a bad idea. And even though it continues to lose money, you're not going to admit that because that admits that it's going to be a bad idea.
Yeah.
So as a quality assurance engineer, as I push back on that and say, no, this is a bad idea, since they're higher up the chain, it just keeps getting pushed down further and further and further.
Right.
And I guess kind of the question with that is off of this situation right here, I mean, I can point out, I can make presentations with problems. What's our solution to this other than just trying to get everybody on board and changing the culture of pushing back and actually delivering something that has some real value behind it?
So thank you for that question. And it's one that I encountered regularly early in my career. And the answer is two-part. One is you're going to have to deliver the thing that you hate.
Exactly. I hate it.
You're going to have to deliver the thing that you hate. And that doesn't mean that it's the end of life, however. It means you get an opportunity to deliver and win for next time. Because once you deliver, you have now created some capital for yourself that you can spend. You don't get a chance to earn that capital, though, until you're a good team player. And so there's a shit sandwich for everybody at the beginning. That when you're in these bad situations, you have to, for the sake of the team, for the sake of your product, for the sake of your relationships, deliver. In the midst of that delivery, however, you can begin planting seeds in the bullshit as it trails behind you, right? Because it's fertile ground now. And the seeds that you're going to plant, are around quality for next time. And it's a pain in the butt, right? Because you don't feel, if they would just listen to you now, they'd be right now. But the long game is what's at stake. And the long game says, play with us in our sandbox now, but show us the toys we can have next time if we're good. And it sucks that that's the way it is. These MBAs think they're doing good by the company and certainly by their superiors. And so by giving them a win, you can win too. But you have to be knowledgeable that you're doing that. If you're just reacting through the hate, if you're just being hate motivated, you're not going to see the opportunity you have to meet them for a beer afterwards and plant the seed for next time. You're not going to go to a product launch party because you're so bitter about the sandwich you had to bite to get to where you are, right? So it's important that you work on two tracks. The I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to do it next time track. And make sure you're planting those seeds proactively for next time. Otherwise, you're going to repeat that cycle until you leave the company burnt out, frustrated, and fucked, as I mentioned earlier. You're probably, it seems like you're pretty close to that, that moment.
It depends.
Yeah.
Honestly, we do a lot very well in a number of different scenarios, but of course, the things that have been a shit factory, they just never stop.
Yeah.
And I don't know why we can't understand this as an MBA. One of the best business decisions you can make is realizing that you made a bad one and stopping.
Right. So my homework for you and for the other QA folks in the room is next year, for the 38th annual one of these, bring a product person. Bring an MBA to the quality conference. I'm not surprised, but I always turn out this way, that only the QA people show up. So it's an echo chamber. As a homework assignment, bring an MBA, bring a product manager, bring a director with you to this conference next year or tomorrow if you're coming back, if they have the time. Get them in the room and let them, because they might not know. That's part of it as well. You'll probably find that they're well-intentioned, just not informed.
Fair enough.
Gentleman over there. You can get the art.
Don't lead with the head though. Don't lead with the head.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The thing that comes to my mind when I hear you say that is that's all fine and good, but it costs money. And the thing that I fight is I know there are better ways of doing things. Because I'm a developer, my pick is with infrastructure. Infrastructure is not features. Features pay the bill, apparently. But in order to get better quality, I need better infrastructure, or, and testing infrastructure is also can be included in that.
Yeah.
So how do you make this argument for we need to do better next time, but you're faced with the obstacle of, but that will cost money?
Right. Thank you for that question. And once again, I'm just shocked that I didn't plant this question. The answer is it's called lunch and learn. And it's a variation on this topic that we talked about earlier. How do I, in the midst of chaos and waste and bad processes, bring my beneficence and my good solutions to fruit, right? How do I show the company the way forward, the light? You have a valuable comrade or an ally in your boss. Your boss wants to show you off, but you don't know that yet. Your boss wants you to lead in the company, and they want to take credit for it. So that means you have more work to do. Thank you. You can get what you want, but you have to do more work for it. And one of the ways you can do that is by creating a lunch series that demonstrates the benefits of a new shiny process, a new shiny tool, a pile of waste that's going on, diminishing over time and saving the company money. And you're going to explain in the midst of this how this lunch and learn half-hour session, 45 minutes of why this solution can save and improve the way we're doing business so that over time the dollars start adding up. In the hopes that your boss attends, in the hopes that they talk to their peer and ultimately open up the purse strings to get your way of thinking done. It's taking a playbook from their interactions to the public in front of them in a way that invites them for feedback. And you'll find, surprisingly, that not only will you get patted on the back for this, but your ideas will get implemented because you didn't fight, you didn't butt heads, you didn't tell people they were dumb and wrong and that the money they spent was wasted. You're saying a new way to spend money and to save money looks different than what we're doing today, and here's why it's such a great thing. So you're positive, you're being optimistic, and you're not being confrontational. And over a short period of time after that little luncheon series, you'll start to see your idea picked up. It's a slam dunk. Yeah. So I think at the heart of your question is, how do you get to do the thing that's right? Yeah, you don't in that environment. You will not get a chance to do it unless you start acting in a way that is forward-looking and doesn't attack anything that's been invested or is confrontational to the existing pecking order. You have to not only do your job, but clear the path, if you will, through the grain that says, here's how we're going to walk to a better place. And it's you becoming an advocate outside of your day job that really is the only way to do this. Inside of the confines of your hierarchical role in your organization, you're stuck between you, your manager, and their boss. However, in an open forum, in an environment like this, in your workplace, at a lunch and learn, even though they're peers, your enemies are also in the room. You say, well, I don't have enemies. Look at me. I'm totally nice. Why would I have enemies? You have enemies. And what I mean by that is you have people who are competing for the dollars that you might have that are more than what they have, you have a role that they wish they had. That tension will create sidebar conversations that will bounce back around and eventually get to the people that want to hear about them. And spread the message as wide as you can in a non-confrontational way and build a sort of momentum outside of your regular chain of command. That's the only way that the squeaky wheel gets heard outside of that chain of command. Unfortunately, the secondary way is leave, right? Leave, and the next time, remember the things that you hated about your current situation and bring them to the interview table and say, I'm not interested in doing this again in the most positive and constructive way possible.
Well, those are good ways, but I think there's another way I have been taught about it. Show them the value, the dollar. Everybody likes the dollar sign, and if you can show them the value of the change or the change you want to bring in, how it's going to benefit the organization in terms of money, your message will go faster and it'll go far enough.
That's true, and thank you for that, because I think the dollars, the value question is really what motivates the MBA types, what certainly motivates the VPs and the CEOs to make sure that the costs for these initiatives are not increasing the underlying value proposition for what they were originally building. So if you're taxing them additionally, it's unlikely that your initiative, no matter how smart it is going to move forward. So you have to demonstrate that cost savings. So thank you for that feedback.
By the way, if you're going to do the lunch and learn, which I think is a really great idea, record it and then also broadcast it out. Effectively make your footprint broader.
Absolutely right. I think that's a terrific point. Yes, sir.
I do have a follow-up question. And I have been in process change and culture change and all that.
Yeah.
I have my experiences. What is your experiences? How long it takes to change a culture from point A to where you can say, yes, I have made a significant difference?
So thank you for that question. And I think, so I'll tell you two scenarios. One scenario took 18 months and made no change. After banging the drums, beating my head, coming out bloodied and bruised, having executive stakeholders stand up in conference rooms and point at me and call me a liar in front of the CEO's face. That didn't go so well. And that took 18 months to get there. Change didn't happen, right? The lunch and learns, the quick change, the having stand-up meetings because it's important that for the effectiveness of our organization that we all talk to each other once a day message can be implemented in less than 6 weeks if you do a lunch and learn. So all of a sudden, you can begin iteratively bringing the behaviors that you want to see that you think will enhance the quality of the business by small steps, widely spread through non-confrontational advertisement and reinforcement. So as little as 6 weeks, you could see changes happening. Yeah.
More questions?
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time today. Thank you for being here.
Remember to go on the app and fill out the survey.